Hello and welcome along to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host for this week, Matt Addison. Before we start, I want to mention that our thoughts are still very much with those who have been impacted by the incident that happened on Water Street shortly after the Liverpool FC title parade on Monday. It happened not too far away from where I was at the time. Obviously, it was very shocking to hear about and report on it, and obviously later to see the videos of what had gone on there. Obviously wanted to mention that. I wanted to mention as well the work of a lot of people who offered lifts and shelter to those who were stranded after what happened at Lime Street Station as well. I think a lot of people pulled together and showed a real good side to the city there, as well as Virgil van Dijk posted on social media earlier this week. The way that the city came together before and after everything is what makes it such a special place. And I don't think, to be honest, that I can sum it up any better than that. Alongside me this week is Michael Plant, and we're going to take a look at some Liverpool FC awards for this year now that the campaign is over. We've got a few different categories to go through. You can have your say as well in the comments as we go along, and whether you agree, whether we've missed anything, and all of those sorts of things as well. Before we get stuck into that, though, as ever, a quick message from our sponsors as well. Don't forget to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan. You can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link gives you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link is in the podcast episode description box for that. Before we get stuck into the categories, Michael, I wanted to bring you in as well on what has happened earlier this week. I'm sure you would echo the sentiments that I've said there in terms of our thoughts being with those people. But it was an overall a fantastic weekend in lots of ways, but obviously marred by that particular incident as well.
Yeah, and I think your intro was fantastic there in terms of just summing up the sentiment around it. And yeah, I'd just like to echo your thoughts really, that I hope everyone is okay and that everyone fully recovers. It was a traumatic, awful event to see kind of unfolding on Sunday night. And thankfully it looks like, by the way, there are no fatalities from it as well, which is a miracle considering some of the things that we saw on Sunday night. So, and like I wasn't there, but I know lots of people who were there, and I'm sure lots of people can relate to the fear of grabbing the phone and instantly calling people to make sure they're okay. That so many people in Liverpool, in the country, and probably throughout the world really will have related to. So, as I say, just thankfully we looked like we got away without any fatalities, and just hoping everyone recovers fully.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep everybody up to date, of course, on Liverpool.com with all of the developments with that story as they come in. But for today's podcast, we obviously wanted to talk about something a little bit lighter and look back at the season, really. Now it's been concluded. Liverpool, we've known for a long time, we're going to be Premier League champions. They've had the chance to savour in that for a few games at the end and then celebrate it as well with what happened on Sunday. But we are going to go through a few different categories. That's the best way, I think, of talking about this season in terms of the individual players. We'll start with the best player. Not the most difficult question, I don't think. Obviously, my answer for that one is Mohamed Salah. I assume that is probably yours as well, Michael. But it's been a fantastic season from the Egyptian. Arguably his best season in a Liverpool shirt, really. And obviously didn't end the season in spectacular form. He and the team kind of dropped off once the title had been won. But in the games that preceded that, absolutely one of the leading players, not just in this season for Liverpool, but one of the best seasons that anybody's ever had for Liverpool, which is quite the statement, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the best seasons that anyone has ever had in the history of the Premier League, which really just sums up how fantastic it was. I mean, if you were to make a nominee of the top 5 or 10 individual campaigns there's ever had in this division, this season that Salah has had would be up there. I think that sums up really just how incredible he's been. He's won 2 of the 3 Player of the Year awards so far. The fourth one hasn't been, 2 of 3. The third one hasn't been announced. I suspect he will certainly wrap that one up as well. And the levels that he has hit this season have just been remarkable. He got over 90% of the vote for the Football Writers Player of the Year, which again just sums up what a landslide it was. And I think actually this season has potentially elevated him from, a Premier League great, which he also has been for a long time, to up there now as in the conversation, at least, for the greatest Premier League player ever. And I think obviously that is built on by what he's done previously, but this campaign has, I think, just brought him to another level. So, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, the Egyptian King, player of the season for Liverpool.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of chatter about the Ballon d'Or, and obviously it's the Champions League final this weekend. That normally has quite a big say in terms of who's going to win that. But I think Mohamed Salah, for what he's done and the levels that he's reached, obviously won the Premier League. There's no outstanding candidate, I don't think, in terms of what we've seen in previous years. It's been pretty obvious that somebody, usually Messi, has won that one. Obviously, that's not been the case for the last couple, but it feels like there's a real conversation to be had about that as well. He's obviously signed himself up for another 2 years at Liverpool. By the time the award comes around, maybe will have, improved and, done a couple more things as well. He's got a full summer to rest, recuperate, and then go again. It feels like he should very much be in that conversation. Whether he is or not with these things, you can never quite be sure. But that's not an unrealistic thing for him to be thinking about, is it? I'm sure he very much will be thinking about it when it comes around.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I mean, it's no secret Salah is a man obsessed with individual accolades and trophies, as well as the team as well. But certainly think he would love to get his hands on that trophy. I think, you mentioned some of the players up for it. I do think that if PSG can win the Champions League on Saturday and Ousmane Dembele can play a part in it, that could just potentially bring him up to another level. But I actually think, based as much on the stats as anything, I think Salah deserves it. You and I spend a lot more time watching Mohamed Salah than we do Rafinha or Dembele or any players like that. But I think he'd be a fantastic and well-deserved recipient of the award if he does ultimately win it.
I think he's become a much more rounded player as well this season. We've seen a lot of seasons in the past. He's had a huge volume of goals. There's been probably not just this season, in fairness to him, probably the last 2 or 3 seasons, but this one in particular in terms of that playmaking, the fact that everything has gone through him. Whenever Liverpool attack, it's usually focused around him. I think that's maybe not something that people who don't watch Liverpool every week would maybe think of with him. There's always been that kind of, is he a bit selfish? Do you have to be a bit selfish to be a player of that kind of, level of quality and self-assurance that he's got? But I do think there's a real playmaker in there as well. Some of his passing has become exceptional. And I mentioned Messi before in terms of the Ballon d'Or. It is a little bit like him at times. He's got that eye for a pass. He can do a lot more than just score goals for Liverpool. And obviously, Liverpool will want that and believe that will continue in the next couple of seasons as well. But I'm fascinated to see what the next evolution is. When you think of Florian Wirtz, we think is a player that Liverpool have a good chance of getting. And, they may well go for a number 9 after that as well. But whichever 2 or 3 players come in the attack or in the sort of attacking midfield department this summer, probably Mohamed Salah is still going to be the man for Liverpool next season. It's going to be interesting, I think, to see how Arne Slot puts that attack together, what he wants from his number 9 and how that links in with Mohamed Salah as well, because, unanimously, he's been Liverpool's best player this season. You want to improve and you want to sort of make a few tweaks to that. You don't want to take anything away from the Egyptian at the same time.
Yeah, I think you've summed that up brilliantly, to be honest. Yeah, it's certainly fascinating to see. I certainly don't think we're going to see a Mohamed Salah next season who's going to be sprinting backwards and doing lots of defending. I think we can all be pretty confident in that. But yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to see. Wirtz has the possibility of playing as a false 9. How would that impact Salah? I think actually Salah would thrive on that personally. If he drops deep, there's something that space inside created. And I think the other interesting side to it is not just what's inside him, what's behind him, because he's pretty much his entire Liverpool career, he's had Trent Alexander-Arnold behind him. That is not going to be the case next season. Jeremy Frimpong's a very different sort of player, assuming obviously he does sign, and then Conor Bradley likewise. So that'll be really interesting to see how it evolves. I think he'll probably be hoping that they just don't really attack too much and means there's not to go backwards. I don't think that's going to happen, certainly with Frimpong. But really, really interesting to see, as you say, the next step in Salah's evolution, and this team under Arne Slot.
Yeah, I'm sure if they get a more prolific and clinical number 9 as well, that will only help him in terms of assists. I can think of quite a few chances this season that he's done all the hard work and then the finishing touch hasn't been added to that. So that, of course, will impact his numbers and all of that kind of thing as well. But obviously the best player is Mohamed Salah. Wanted to move on to the best player not called Mohamed Salah, which is our next category. Again, it's probably not that difficult. I imagine we possibly might have gone for the same player. Virgil van Dijk is the pick that I've gone with, which, again, it's reasonably obvious, isn't it? But is he the person that you went with, and what made you go with him?
Yeah, I've gone with Virgil van Dijk. I think it is just the obvious one. Look, he is the captain in the team. He played every minute up until that trip to Brighton. I wonder whether he was a tiny little bit disappointed that he didn't play in that game, actually, because he would have set a Premier League record, wouldn't he? But he's just been colossal at the back of this season. Not flawless, one or two mistakes, but, I can probably count on one hand really the number of mistakes. And I certainly think up until that period, I think this was a couple of players, up until, let's say, March time, he was just outstanding. And he obviously formed a very solid relationship with Konate at centre-back. But then when Gomez came in for a little bit, I think also as well, that was seamless. And I don't know. I think sometimes as well, Van Dijk, his qualities, we all know what a good defender is, but there's almost these qualities that are difficult to define, are difficult to explain. And it's leadership. He's an aura about him. He has a calmness and a composure that I think rubs off on other players. And he is a winner. And, you will have spoken to him quite a few times in the mix zone this season. I spoke to him a handful of times, and there's just such a supreme confidence to him that, and you ask him a question, and he just shrugs it off. It's just water off the duck's back for him. So yeah, he's been colossal this season. Look, Van Dijk would be number 2. I think number 3, and I think you might have seen not one for number 3 would be Ryan Gravenberch as well. But certainly Van Dijk's number 2. But I'm interested to know what your choice is for that one.
Yeah, Virgil van Dijk obviously is number 2. I think probably Ryan Gravenberch could be number 3. I'm going to mention him for one of the later categories as well. But I think he is probably an outstanding pick, really, in terms of what he's done this season. You probably have to go through that spine, don't you, with Van Dijk, Gravenberch. I would mention Alexis McAllister as well, who I think has been quietly exceptional, and obviously Mohamed Salah, the main man up front. If you've got that kind of spine, Alisson is obviously up there as well in terms of quality, but maybe hasn't played as much football as what you'd ideally like from your number one goalkeeper. Obviously, that's why they've got Kelleher, and next season we'll have Mohamed Ashvili for that exact reason. But yeah, I think with a spine that strong, it's probably no huge surprise that Liverpool have gone all the way in the Premier League. But yeah, Virgil van Dijk, just to finish off on him, I mean, an exceptional season, as you say, supreme confidence, leadership, huge amount of quality. I thought Jamie Carragher summed it up well, I think 2 or 3 months ago, where he kind of said that he's so far ahead of the rest of the centre-backs. It's almost not just hard to describe how good he is, but also quite hard to sort of assess where he is in his career and where he is. I think for me, there's no doubt that he's the defining centre-back of this generation, of this era. He's right up there with anybody that you want to talk about in terms of the Premier League all-time greats. He's exceptional in terms of his defensive abilities, but what he offers Liverpool in terms of possession and being able to pass out from the back, I think is exceptional. He makes all of the players around him considerably better. We mentioned Gravenberch there. I think it probably helps him being in that new position that he's got Virgil van Dijk just behind him. So yeah, there's no box really that you can't tick with Virgil van Dijk. It's easy, and I think sometimes when you watch him every week, I know I certainly am guilty of this, you kind of just get used to it, and his normal level is probably an 8 or a 9 out of 10 for everybody else in the Premier League. So I do think it's important that we mention him as well as Mohamed Salah. But is there anybody else there that you thought was in the conversation that we've not mentioned of those 4 or 5 that we've said there? I mean, normally Trent Alexander-Arnold would be up there, but it's maybe not been the most stellar of seasons, perhaps understandably from him in terms of his impact, in terms of what's been going on behind the scenes. Is there anybody else that you wanted to mention as well?
I think the only one I would mention is Konate. I think he's been brilliant as well, formed such a solid partnership alongside Van Dijk. I think that, like we were talking about, I remember a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about player our team of the season, and I said Van Dijk, Salah and Gravenberch are musts. I think there's an argument to say that Alisson, Konate and McAllister should be involved, and that hasn't, nothing has changed since then in my mind. I think and that doesn't mean that Szoboszlai didn't have a good season, or Alexander-Arnold or Diaz. These players all had really good seasons, but those 6 in particular, I think, were just a step above the rest throughout the campaign. But I've got a bit of an off-script question for you, if you don't mind me chucking one in. I saw in the teams of the year, Jamie Carragher put Alexis McAllister in his, and didn't put Ryan Gravenberch in his, and said McAllister as being Liverpool's best midfielder this season. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, because I don't agree. I can understand a little bit the logic where he's coming from, but I think Gravenberch has been Liverpool's best midfielder this season. But I'm interested to get your thoughts on it.
I don't think there's much between them, to be honest. I think Ryan Gravenberch probably stands out more in people's heads because they're a bit more surprised about him, and it didn't happen previously. I think McAllister last season, in Jurgen Klopp's last season, I think McAllister was Liverpool's player of the season. I think he was that good across the course of that campaign that maybe not quite in the same way as Van Dijk, but maybe people have got used to it a little bit more, and he's had one or two moments where he's maybe not been in the team because it's been rotated a little bit more than Gravenberch. So I'd probably just about go for Gravenberch, but Alexis McAllister very, very close behind him. And you mentioned the piece that we did with our team of the season. I didn't put McAllister in that, but then afterwards I thought maybe that was a mistake not to do that. I think I put Declan Rice in there, which I think was around the time that he'd scored those 2 goals against Real Madrid. So maybe that was in the back of my mind. But yeah, certainly very, very close, I think, to being in that conversation. Definitely he's an absolutely exceptional footballer and is just so technically gifted, but he's got all of the other things as well. I was having a conversation with somebody about him, about how for somebody so small and having stood next to him in the mix zone, he's quite a bit shorter than I am, and I'm not the tallest person in the world, but he does not have to put a foot in as well. He's really strong, not afraid to shirk a tackle, and yeah, he's a really, really exceptional footballer. But let's move on to the next category then, the best game of the season, which I think is really, really tricky, actually. There's been a lot of games where Liverpool have made light work of it, being a couple of goals up and haven't really had to do anything too exceptional. But I think there's 2 that stand out to me across the course of the game in terms of the level of performance and the kind of statement of performance. Both of them in Manchester City away and Manchester United away as well. Now, the United one, in hindsight now, you can look back and say, well, they finished 15th, and it doesn't look quite so impressive. But I think at the time it was the 3rd game, obviously, Arne Slot's first trip to Old Trafford as Liverpool manager, which is obviously a big statement to go there and win in the way they did. But Manchester City as well, that game was one where it's not very often that team goes to the Etihad. And again, City haven't had the best season, but they did come into the Champions League places. By this point in the season, they had turned around a little bit and started to put it together a few results. But Liverpool went there, dominated possession and dominated the game and penned them in, got the goals and could have won by more, but didn't particularly need to. So, yeah, those are the 2 that I've gone for. There's probably a couple of others in terms of more exciting games. That the Tottenham away game was one of the best games in terms of the number of goals and that kind of thing. But for me, the best Liverpool performances, I went with City and Manchester United. But are any of those on your list, and which ones have you gone for?
Well, that Tottenham away game was the first game I covered for Liverpool.com, and I did think at the time, is it like this every week? But we were laughing beforehand, saying, truthfully, the most entertaining game was the match at Goodison. Now, I'm not going to pick that one because I don't think the listeners will enjoy that one too much, but that was probably the most entertaining game. But I think I would agree with your choices, absolutely. I'd actually mention both fixtures against City, because the one at Anfield, Liverpool were just outstanding, just didn't give them an inch to play in, just completely dominated the game. And at the time, City were on a bad run of form. But to do that to the champions of England is incredible. So that was one that jumped out. But I think the one that I really initially just straight away thought was, do you remember the game at West Ham? I think it was the last match of 2024. And Salah was just unbelievable that night. But all of the attackers were brilliant. And it was, I think, was it 5-1 or 5-0? And it was, but it felt like it could have been 10. They were just unbelievable that night. So I think that was, the best performance of the season, which actually came a couple of days after that Tottenham one. I think about a week after that Tottenham one. So, so that would be the one that stands out to me personally.
Yeah, I mean, that was an exceptional attacking performance from Liverpool. I think West Ham were that bad that I'm not sure how good, whether it was good of Liverpool or whether it was just absolutely atrocious from them. And to be honest, the press box is that far away from the pitch. It was quite hard to tell anyway, to be honest. It was a bit like watching it on a postage stamp. But let's move on to the next category, which I think will be slightly quicker. The best goal of the season. Again, there's been a couple of those to choose from. the one that I've gone for is Alexis McAllister against Tottenham in the game where Liverpool won the Premier League title. I think that was an exceptional goal from him. That's the one that sticks out to me. There's probably a couple of team goals that you can put in there. There's, I'm sure, a couple of ones from Mohamed Salah as well. But I think that was the one that he spoke very glowingly about afterwards. And obviously it combines it being an excellent goal with what it meant later on in that day as well. But which goal have you gone for goal of the season?
In kind of researching for this, I wanted to watch back all the goals, and then I just thought, no, I just don't have time for that. But the two that stood out for me were, do you remember Salah's card finish against Bournemouth?
Yes.
Early February. That was just brilliant individually. That was when he was just at his pomp during the season. And the other one that again, when Salah was at his best, was, do you remember the assist against West Ham in again the last match of 2024? Was saying, and he kind of, I don't even know how to describe what he did, but he almost kind of dummied the ball, let it roll across his body, and then shot. And I actually don't think it went down as an assist, but then I think Cody Gakpo knocked it in. So for that moment of skill alone, I'd put that one up there. I think I am just going to go for that one. Maybe a bit of a strange choice, but I just think that moment of skill was just so outstanding. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it feels like a season where there's not been as many kind of screamers and those kind of things for Liverpool. It's very much, as we keep saying on this podcast, it's all about control. It's all about being dominant and that kind of thing. But yeah, there has been one or two big moments and big let-offs. There's not even really been that many sort of clinical counter-attacks that we've seen from Liverpool in the past. It's been a slightly different season, but certainly a successful one. I'm sure there'll be a number of excellent goals that we've forgotten as well. So do let us know in the comments about those. Like you, I did think, maybe I could go back and watch all of those goals. I'm sure I probably will do across the summer, but yeah, certainly haven't had time to think about that too much this week. But let's move swiftly on then to the best moment of the season. Mine is very much linked to the best goal. It's the same game, really. I've gone for our game, the Tottenham game, when it was won. Obviously, a unique experience to be able to be there, a moment that not just me, but everybody in there pretty much had waited for their entire lives, or certainly for a lot of the lives of a lot of the people who were in that stadium. And those watching at home, I'm sure, will have had very similar emotions surrounding that game against Tottenham, the way it unfolded, the fact that Liverpool had to come from behind, the fact that McAllister scored that goal. But in the end, it was pretty easy. And the last half an hour or so was a celebration. And then, of course, all of the stuff that happened afterwards as well. I think, yeah, the best moment for me in a season of a few good moments and a couple of moments that we've already discussed, I think just that day really is never, ever going to be possible to be beaten. Is there anything that you've come up with that could fit this category? I know it's obviously very hard to compete with that in terms of the occasion, but there has been a lot of good moments this season from Liverpool. Yeah,
I mean, it is, without question, it's that moment. I mean, you said to me afterwards it was one of the best days of your life. So, I mean, that sums it up for Liverpool fans, just what that day meant. It was always, that is the obvious answer. I mean, listen, going to Old Trafford and winning 3-0 is never a bad day. I'm sure Liverpool fans will always enjoy that. Likewise, going to the Etihad and winning is always a nice one as well. But that was the standout moment, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, absolutely no question about it. I've honestly never seen that many people in that kind of space outside Anfield. When I came out that day, it literally took me half an hour to walk from one side of Anfield to the other. And then, yeah, I mean, the scenes, I think, are just absolutely incredible. It was amazing as well, obviously, the day that they lifted the Premier League trophy, but even that didn't come close, I don't think, to what happened when it was confirmed and when everybody celebrated in that way. It was just a special, special weekend, and I don't think that is going to be topped anytime soon, to be honest. Even if Liverpool win next season, it's not going to quite be the same as what it was then. So, yeah, a clear winner in that category, I think, for both of us. Let's move on to our final category then, the biggest surprise. I did tease my answer before in terms of it being Ryan Gravenberch. I don't think even he would have thought that this season was going to unfold in the way it did. In fact, even a couple of weeks before the season started, I don't think he would have thought that he was going to be playing that position quite as often. I think Arne Slot had told him last summer that he saw him as a number 8. It was then obviously what happened after that with Martin Zubimendi not happening. Obviously looks like he's going to go to Arsenal now, so it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. But for Liverpool, at least, it's worked out brilliantly. It's hard to imagine that had Zubimendi come in, he would have had a season even close to what Ryan Gravenberch has managed. We always knew he had talent, of course, and I'm not surprised that he's kind of showing that eventually, but it had reached the point really under Jurgen Klopp where it looked like he wasn't really going to get the opportunities. He was almost in a Chiesa position, really, of kind of people wanting him to be in the team, but it just wasn't really happening when he did come in. He was playing a few Europa League games and things like that last season, but yeah, this season, absolutely exceptional argument for being, in the conversation for the Premier League Player of the Year. He's obviously won the Young Player of the Year award. An exceptional season, which, as I say, I don't think anybody really saw coming. So yeah, Ryan Gravenberch is my biggest surprise, very much a pleasant surprise, but certainly a surprise, I think, in that category. But who or what have you gone for?
Yeah, well, I'll go for something different. I mean, I did consider Gravenberch. I think he probably is, certainly in terms of a positive, the big surprise. I think the other one is probably a pretty obvious one, but it is Arne Slot. Just how seamlessly he has adapted to the league. I don't think anyone could have in a million years believed it was going to be just quite this good. And the transition, I mean, we keep talking about the transition from Klopp to Slot. It's been, an evolution. They've made strides forwards, made positive progress rather than just a transition. So it's unbelievable, really. I didn't expect that. And the only other one that I think is a bit of a negative one is Harvey Elliott. And I think that only Darwin Núñez played more games last year than Elliott. Now, there's a lot of substitute appearances in that, but to not start a single Premier League game before the title was wrapped up was a huge surprise. I think, I know it's a bit of a negative one. We're certainly on an optimistic, positive kind of mindset with this season, understandably. But yeah, that's just one that jumped out to me. And I suppose even there's an argument to say that the fact that so few players were trusted to start is a bit of a surprise. But yeah, we'll keep the positive spirits. Let's not talk about anything negative.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's obviously loads of positives. Ryan Gravenberch being the obvious one in terms of a positive surprise. But I do think Harvey Elliott is an interesting point. I spent a lot of last summer hearing people saying that, this 4-2-3-1 that Arne Slot was going to bring in is going to bring the best out of him. He's going to be a player that he can build the team around. He's, finally got this chance to play as a number 10 in a system, and it just hasn't quite worked out for him. I mean, I imagine there's going to be a lot of interest in him from elsewhere this summer, and he might have to move on. I think he was in tears on the last game of the season. That possibly is a hint as to what might come in the summer. But yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think the other one that I'd put into not quite the same category as Gravenberch, but being unlocked in a positive sense, probably is Cody Gakpo as well. Probably shouldn't be a surprise that player plays in his best position and suddenly looks better than what he did when he was playing out position. But I think certainly that is definitely a positive that they've managed to get a little bit more out of him and a little bit more out of Luis Diaz as well, though it didn't quite last for the full season. But yeah, I think there's a few positive surprises, a few negative ones. I suppose Federico Chiesa could go into the same category as Harvey Elliott in terms of we thought he would probably play a little bit more. I don't think anybody ever thought that he was going to be in the team every single week, but to not play hardly any games at all is certainly interesting. And yeah, there's a few interesting names, isn't there, to look ahead into the summer, really. Is there anybody else that I've missed there that you're particularly excited about seeing what happens to in the summer? I suppose Jarell Quansah maybe is one that you could throw into that as well. There's quite a few big decisions, I think, to be made this summer for Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, Quansah he signed a new contract recently enough, didn't he? He's still young enough that you feel that he could probably just do with being in and around that environment and that atmosphere. I think he should stay. But, I mean, to bring it back to Elliott, I think the time's come now for him to move on. He's a fantastic player, a very talented footballer. I think he lacks end product a lot of times. And I think the biggest criticism you can have of him is when he was given starting opportunities this season, he didn't impress. Now, the argument against that is, well, like, he's coming into a team that wasn't fully functioning, that was rotated, that you had other players, trying to find their way in the team a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think if you add up 7 or 8 starting games, I don't think he impressed in any of them. That's probably too many. So, and it's interesting, his stance seems to have softened a little bit in January. He said, I'm not, we celebrate that goal, anyone like that, I'm not leaving, to a few interviews. Obviously, he did one with the Echo, didn't he? And he spoke about how he might have to for his career, and you can just see that the tears in the final day of the season. I think you can maybe see a little bit of direction of travel with that one. He's far too good a player to be sitting on the bench every week. And then just to bring you back to Gakpo, that you said, the thought of him playing now as a central striker seems just unbelievable. I mean, how did anyone ever think he was a central striker? I don't mean that as a criticism, but he's just been so good. But yeah, I can't really add. I'm trying to think of anyone. An interesting one about Endo. I think Endo, be interested to see what role he has to play next season, because I think Swat warmed to him actually as the season went on, didn't he? And he had some really important cameo appearances off the bench. But yeah, I can't really add any more, to be honest, to what you said. You summed it up brilliantly.
Well, I'll take that, certainly. I mean, it's been a good season, certainly. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of time for us to discuss all of those sorts of things across the course of the summer. As we say, there's plenty of interesting things in terms of incomings. We mentioned Florian Wirtz and Jeremy Frimpong, but outgoings as well. It's going to be a summer of change, potentially, depending, of course, on what offers Liverpool get. I'm sure, if Harvey Elliott is to move on, they're not going to be doing that on the cheap. It would be a very, very substantial fee that Liverpool would look for from that. And I think that's probably the biggest factor, really, in why it wouldn't shock me at all if he was still here at the end of the summer, because you look at the teams that are interested in him. Would they be able to pay enough of a fee to be able to convince Liverpool to let him go? It's going to be interesting with the new hierarchy and all the rest of it in the background working. They've very much extracted the most out of those sorts of things in the past. But as I say, I'm sure we'll have plenty of time across the course of the summer to discuss all of that. I think we will leave it there, though, for this week's show. We've gone through all of our picks for the various award categories that I've picked out. Do let us know in the comments, and we will have a look through those across the course of the next few days. But yeah, thank you to Michael for joining me, and for you guys at home, as ever, for watching and listening. We'll be back next week with the next Liverpool.com podcast.